What's up, guys? It is Chris back for Watch Chris. Today we're talking about a list of watch brands that I think you should avoid as a watch collector. I do want to preface this video as I go through this list. If there are watches on this list that you actually like or you actually want to purchase, of course, this list is my list. This is something personal to me. If you find these watches attractive, you should go out and buy them. It's your money, it's your life. Buy the watches that you love. I absolutely believe in that. So if anything on this list you disagree with, I completely understand that. And I actually agree with you. I think you should go out and buy that watch. It doesn't really matter what I have to say. The first brand on this list is a brand that gets tons of hate on the internet, and it is not Hublot. Actually, Hublot does not show up on this list. It's actually Franck Muller. Franck Muller get tons of hate all over the internet and YouTube and all different articles. Everywhere, all over the place, they get tons of hate, and there is a few different reasons. The number one reason, in my opinion, is the fact that they have very high prices and they use ETA movements. Also, I think a lot of their designs are somewhat tired. They've been copied many times, and I think the tide sort of turned on them at some point. And really, all of their designs now are very similar to what they used to make, just maybe larger. They have weird collaborations with lighters and things like that now. Not sure what the brand is doing or where they're going, but I know I'm not a huge fan of what they're doing, and I think a lot of people out there feel the same way. The next brand on this list is actually a part of Franck Muller. It's actually a brand called Swach. If you're not familiar with them, there are plenty of stories out there about them making very low quality watches. Their watches actually look pretty technical. They want to compete with brands like Richard Mille on a slightly cheaper level. Even though I'm using the word cheaper, these watches are not cheap. They are very expensive, and they use ETA movements. So basically all of their watches use ETA movements, and their MSRPs are extremely expensive. So it's sort of the same story as Franck Muller. They use the same formula, high prices, off-the-shelf movements, where there really isn't anything wrong with off-the-shelf movements like that. However, when you're charging those sort of prices and you're not really adding that much value to the movements, it really doesn't make a lot of sense. And I think a lot of people just start hating the brand, and that becomes a avalanche or a tidal wave of hate. Also, reports of low quality, the watches not being made well, that all adds up to obviously something that I don't find attractive, and I think a lot of other people don't find attractive as well. Another brand on this list that sort of follows the same trend as the first two brands that we've mentioned, it is Graham. They have very polarizing designs with lots of extra pieces that are fitted to the sides of the case or on top of the glass, on top of the sapphire crystal. You have these magnifiers and things like that. They have a swordfish watch, and they have trigger actuated chronographs. Very weird watches. Some of them are pretty cool. Some of them I actually like. I actually owned one at one point, which was kind of crazy. I didn't really love the watch. It felt really bad on wrist because of that extra mechanism that they have on the side of the watch. These are pretty high priced for the movements that you're getting. So again, you're getting that same ratio. You're getting a very high price with a very cheap movement. And they also tank on the secondary market. So if you ever buy one at retail, you immediately lose all of that money. You cannot get that back. And they dump a lot of watches on the secondary market. And that's the reason why, their prices just fall immediately after you buy one. That matters to you. It does somewhat matter to me. I don't buy watches as investments. I've said this all the time. However, it does matter to me that I buy them at the right price, so that if I do ever want to sell them, I don't lose my shirt. I actually hopefully would not lose much money if I went to sell a watch if I didn't end up liking it. So a watch like Graham, a large watch that's very uncomfortable sometimes, if you buy it, you end up not liking it. Obviously, it would be very hard to sell if you didn't get a good price for it. Next, I'm just going to name a bunch of watch brands. This is going to be probably 5 or 6 watch brands that I'm going to name. I have Diesel, Movement, Filippo Loretti, Daniel Wellington, and Vincero. These are all brands that are considered, I guess, fashion brands, but usually what they make are pretty cheap quartz watches. Sometimes they make automatic watches or mechanical watches that are pretty cheap. Most of them are made in China, which again isn't a bad thing, but a lot of their marketing is weird. They have high prices, they mark them down so that you can buy them at an extreme discount. It's kind of the Invicta way of doing things. Invicta is on this list. We'll talk about that in just a few minutes, but those are all those fashion brands. So I just wanted to group them all together and talk about fashion brands. So there you go. Next is a watch brand that makes tons of watches. They own a few different brands. It's Fossil Watches. Now, Fossil Watches, they are, some of them, pretty good designs. They do make automatic watches, quartz watches. They use a lot of branding and IP from other areas. So, you know, sports and entertainment and things like that. In my experience, I've owned Fossil watches, especially when I first started collecting. I owned a few Fossil watches and they are very cheaply made in my experience, especially early on when I was collecting. But I do know that they make pretty cheap watches and I avoid all Fossil watches. When I see a watch, and even if I found it attractive, if I find out it's a Fossil watch, I avoid it. Now, it doesn't go for brands like Zodiac. However, I do feel Zodiac are slightly subpar when compared to other watches in their categories sometimes. However, I'm not including Zodiac on this list. I'm only including Fossil watches. Next is a brand that has an incredible history. They made some incredible watches using the El Primero movement. They were actually associated with brands like Zenith. They have a lot of vintage watches that are very highly collectible even today. I'm talking about Movado. Movado was a very historic, very well-made brand back in the day. However, what ended up happening is they turned to quartz movements. They relied on cheaper movements and cheaper construction, and a lot of their watches are basically now mall watches. So people go to the mall, they are slightly nicer than what you would normally get at the mall, but technically I would say Movado are mall watches and they really have kept themselves there. They make good money, I guess, doing it. They aren't really paying homage to their rich heritage and their history. They just kind of churn out mall watches. So earlier I mentioned Invicta. I'll talk about them right now. Obviously, Invicta, a brand that I think a lot of people should consider avoiding. They do make some pretty good watches. There's a Pro Diver, I think it's called, that's very affordable. Obviously not at their MSRP, but what they actually sell for on the secondary market, you know, under $100 for an automatic watch that gets around 200 meters of water resistance. They're not bad divers. However, a majority of their watches are very, very, very expensive at the MSRP. However, sell at a ridiculous discount. It's a gimmick to get people interested, I guess. I'm not sure how many people actually fall for that portion of it. However, they do have some weird designs. They make very big watches. They use a lot of weird movements. Overall, I don't find their aesthetic pleasing. I find a lot of their watches to be very weird and gimmicky, and obviously the MSRP thing where they're making the watches a lot more expensive than they actually are. I think that's just stupid. I think they should stop doing that, but obviously it's been part of their selling point or the way that they sell their watches for a very long time, so they're not going to end up doing anything about that. Next is a brand that you might be a little bit surprised that's on this list. It's Swatch and the Swatch collaborations that they've been doing lately with Omega and Blancpain. I would say to avoid these, even though I own many of them, I would tell people to avoid them if they ask me about them, unless they are a watch collector. So this is a little bit different on this list, but I did want to include this because if you are a watch collector, you own other watches, you understand that maybe one of these Swatch collaborations with Omega or the 50 Fathoms, you're not going to actually use that watch on a daily basis. It's not a watch that you could use every day and actually have it survive for a very long time. I think a lot of people don't understand that. And I think if you're not a collector, obviously you definitely don't understand it. If you are a collector, I think you understand it. You won't be wearing the watch on a daily basis. You understand it's for fun. It is expensive, $450 for the 50 Fathoms, $300 for the Moon Swatch. So they're expensive. They're not daily wearers. They're not something that's going to last. There are plenty of other watches out there that I would suggest prior to buying one of these. So that's why I put it on this list. Okay, we're coming to the end of the list, and there's a watch company on here that I didn't really want to add here. However, since they're still selling watches, now they're selling them at a heavy discount. It's Brick Watch Company, the watch company that was started by David Portnoy, the guy who owns Barstool Sports. And he came out with his own watch. It's a very generic design, a very generic looking watch. They are Swiss made or have Swiss movements or something like that. But they were just fashion watches, or looked like fashion watches, that were kind of expensive because they weren't really designed very well. And he was asking, I think they were like $5,000 when they originally, or $3,000 when they originally came out. And now they're selling for a discount. And he took a lot of heat over their designs and the prices. So obviously I'm adding it to this list because of that. So the designs, the movements that they're using versus the prices. So I would avoid these watches, obviously, because they're not selling well. And again, if you want to buy something and not lose your shirt, if you end up not liking it and you need to sell it, then, you know, there you go. Don't buy these watches. Bois Mercier, one of the first watches that I've ever purchased was a Bois Mercier. I actually like some of their designs. However, a lot of their designs, their recent designs, I just don't find attractive. I feel like they can't get anything right lately. I see articles about these watches when they come out with a new integrated bracelet watch with a weird blue clear dial. I just feel like they can't get the designs right. And again, it's one of those brands that had something in the past, and currently today they're not making the best watches. They sell at heavy discounts, so you should never buy them at retail. You should always buy them on the secondary market. I mean, if you like them, of course, they are pretty well made watches. For me, I'm not a big fan. And like I said, I'm not a big fan of what they're doing now. I did like the brand at one point. One of my first watches that I ever owned, one of my first luxury watches that I ever owned. And I really love that watch. I would love to rebuy that watch at some point. But at this point, I don't think I would ever buy a modern Bois Mercier. Last but not least is Gevril. This is another brand. I've owned a lot of the watches on this list, so I do know from personal experience. Gevril is one of those brands that remind me of Invicta. However, they make higher quality watches that are really high MSRP versus what they actually sell for. And these are a brand that sold on places like HSN and Shop NBC. They sold for, you know, very good prices compared to what their MSRP were. And I think I fell for that at some point. I bought one of their watches, not a badly made watch. However, they make a lot of homages and they don't sell for a very good amount of money. So definitely never buy these at retail. If you like these watches, never buy them at retail. And obviously, for me, I avoid them completely. At some point in my life, I decided not to buy watches like this, so I no longer do. Anyway, guys, there's my list. I know it's a weird list to make, and I hope I'm not offending anyone out there. Like I said, if there is a watch on this list that you like, you should go out and buy that watch. Don't make my list affect you in any way at all. And number one, and number two, just be smart about buying watches on this list. If you're buying them, never buy them at retail, always buy them on the secondary market and get the absolute best price that you can. If you do that, you're buying smart. And when you go to resell that watch, if you end up not liking it, or you find that the quality isn't what you thought it would be, then you're not going to lose a lot of money when you go to resell the watch. Now, some of the watches on here are pretty affordable, so that won't be a problem. I'm talking about the more expensive watches on this list. Obviously, you will have a problem if you go and sell them, if you especially buy them at retail. Anyway, guys, tell me what you think down in the comments below. I know there are brands that I did not include on this list that could be included here, so definitely add some brands down in the comment section below. I want to hear what you guys have to say. Please also don't forget to like, subscribe, hit that bell icon. It is super helpful for the channel and I very much appreciate it. Hopefully you found this video entertaining or useful. If you did, hit that bell icon, hit the subscribe button, and of course like this video because I very much appreciate it and it is helpful. And hit that like button because it is very helpful for the channel. Anyway, guys, thank you for logging on. I'll catch you guys in the next video.